I don't know how much longer we'll have a post-spring transfer portal, but we got one. Okay, so if I walk in and I take over a program year one, on one hand, I've got just the way I want to do things. And I'm like, go, go, go. It used to be that the roster you had was the roster you had. Yeah. Now it's like that little quarter machine down at the casino game in the beach where it could push the quarters off the edge. And I've heard you say before, I don't coach in fear of the portal. In year one, how mindful do you have to be at least that I got some guys, I think it'll work out if they stay here. But if I run them off in spring, I'll never know. Or is it just I'm going to do it my way, whatever comes, comes?
Yeah, I think I'm going to do it my way. And I think my way has just changed and evolved over the years. We put clear-cut expectations in front of our kids. They understand exactly what we're asking for. We don't try to drive them to levels of insanity like maybe back in the day when old school coaches could just push kids, off that cliff or off that quarterbank as you're talking about. And I think the way we run our program, we're able to be very demanding, very hard, push the limits of it, but get the full buy-in that we're looking for. And I think with the way we coach and present and create the expectations of what we're trying to do, if a kid's not on board with that, it probably won't work out and it probably won't get where we want to go.
When you first took this job, which is a little over a year ago now, what are some of the first conversations like? I assume you meet with players, you meet with everybody you can. Yeah. I mean, what kind of feedback are you looking for from players? What kind of information are they seeking from you? Like, what are those introductory meetings? I know you knew a lot of the guys, yeah. But for the ones you didn't know, or the ones who didn't know you as a head coach, what's that sort of first dipping the toe in the water like?
Yeah, it was unique here because it was unlike anything else I think people go through, where I had strong relationships with some parts of the roster, knew of certain parts of the roster, and no relationships with some guys, right? And so you were kind of at so many different stages with different players in the program. I met one-on-one with everybody. I think that's really important. And I think you let the conversation kind of get steered by the kid. At that point, you try to put yourself in the kid's shoes and say, okay, this kid chose to come here to play for Texas A&M and whatever version it looked like when they decided to come here, and everything's gotten rocked, right? Like coach is no longer here. I don't know who my position coach is. So you put yourself in the kid's shoe a little bit and say, like, part of this is just, hey, this is an open platform for you to come in here and let's talk about, what's important to you and what matters. To some kids, that's a personal conversation and getting to know them a little bit and getting to know who they are and what they're all about. For some kids, that's questions about scheme and direction and how much do I fit, what this thing looks like moving forward. And for some kids, you're just kind of explaining you, like, here's who I am, here's who Coach Elko is, like, here's what I believe in. And but you kind of let the kid kind of take the question and run with it, because I think each kid is at a completely different spot in terms of their mindset when all of that happens, right? And it's such a tumultuous situation for a young person to go through.
A lot of people watching this are familiar with what it's like shopping for a house, home buying, right. Moving in. Normally when you move into a house, though, it's been staged, it's been cleaned, it's made to look the best it could possibly look.
Right.
All right, so when you're taking over a job, it's sort of the opposite of that. It's just left the way whoever was there previously had left it, right. As if they just disappeared and just jetted out of town. So when you walk in, like I've talked to several coaches, I'd be interested to get your perspective on this, about the misconceptions of taking over a job. And one of the key things they all go to is the misconception is when you start day one, it's just you moving forward with blinders on. In reality, a lot of them say, you don't have to go backwards, but there's some stuff you have to undo. There's some knots you have to untie before you can ever start to move forward. Did you ever feel like that when you took this job?
Yeah, I think so. And I think, again, that's where I had a little bit of a unique perspective because I had been here. And so in a lot of instances, and this was the case when I took over at Duke, you don't really know what you're walking into, right? You're going to walk into this program and you have to figure everything out. You have to figure out, why did it not work? Why did it work for a while? It stopped working for a little bit. What were the problems? What really happened? Where are these kids mentally? Like, you had all of that. Here, because I had a little bit more of a working knowledge of the program, the players, kind of where things were, I maybe had a little bit better pulse on kind of what were some of those knots, what were some of those things. And I think I was able to talk to the kids right off the bat about, okay, I know where you want to be. I know where we are. Here's just some of the things I think can help us get where we want to go.
Yeah. Alignment has been a forever word in your profession. It should be a word in every profession, but alignment's been a word that all coaches have sought. And when you have it, you know not to take it for granted because you hear horror stories from elsewhere. And to me, it's never been more prevalent for me to hear it than lately. Because lately, the rev share or the NIL structure, it sort of changed the connectivity and how important it is between president to athletic director to head coach. How do you feel about that connectivity here right now?
Yeah, I think alignment here is at an all-time high. I'm thankful for President Mark Welsh and his leadership and the way he kind of has gotten into this thing with us to try to figure out how the university can help. I think the relationship with Trev Alberts has been great since the day he got here, and I think him and I are working hand in hand to try to find a vision for how we can make this program what we all believe it should be. And you're right. I think nowadays, it used to be we can just kind of get into our little football silo and figure the football piece of it out. What we need now as football coaches is a lot of help from the department, the university, because when you talk about NIL, rev share, I mean, you're basically turning this into a business model, and that's not something we have the resources to completely control. And so the ability to get in a room with the decision makers and have them be able to bounce ideas off of each other, I think is really important. We've been able to do that here.
What does that look like if I'm you and I'm at my desk? I mean, how many times a day? Here's what I think. I think maybe a viewer would listen to that and it makes sense to them, but it's more 50,000 foot.
Right.
What they'd love to do is surveillance camera fly on the wall in your office at 2:30 on a Tuesday afternoon in March, and you're looking at a computer screen, or you're getting feedback from a recruit or whatnot, and I got to call my AD right now, or I got to call a donor in Houston. I need this right now.
Yeah.
Like in the weeds, without giving particulars, what does the functionality of that look like?
Yeah, I think I'd like to sell that access for an NIL market.
There you go.
No, I think it's on a lot of different levels. I think we try to be proactive, right? I think the first thing that we're trying to do is be as proactive as we can so we're not putting fires out as instantly as you're talking about, right? What I don't ever want to get into a situation of is, hey, here's the recruit we're coveting, and this is what we're going to need, and now I got to go figure out how to get it. And I think so I spend a lot of my time trying to get out on the front end and saying, okay, like here's what I think it needs to look like. Here's a big picture vision of where I think we got to get to. We've had a lot of meetings behind closed doors with all of the people that will be involved in putting that together so that it's maybe not quite as helter-skelter as maybe you're envisioning or hoping it could be. But then you still have those moments, right? Like you hear, okay, hey, here's an opportunity for us to do something that I hadn't really thought about. Like we got to get this in motion like quickly, right? And your ability to mobilize all of those people, get the answers that you need, get the strategy that you need, get the direction that you need, and be able to go out there and execute that is really important. And in this world of, what hasn't changed is the speed at which recruiting goes and the speed at which football goes. But now you're probably bringing in a lot more people than just us coaches who are used to, having to run at that pace, right? And so getting everybody on the same page with how quick things needs to go is really important.
So back in the day, I would go to school, and both my parents worked, so I would ride the bus to Mima's house. I would stay at her house until they came and picked me up every day. So she was a big gardener. So she would plant tulips the same time every year.
Right.
She would do some flowers I can't even pronounce. But it was the same process every year. In your world right now, the process is totally inverted. It feels like every 12 months because the rules change and the structure changes. If I were in that position, I'd be worried about implementing my stuff. But then on the other hand, I would be constantly curious whether someone somewhere 1,000 miles away is in the process of figuring out a better way to do it than we're doing it right now. And yet I've got to stay focused on my task at hand. How do you stay aware of the entire frontier? And how do you stay aware of maybe the practices that other people are implementing and trying to stay on the cutting edge in an ever-evolving space.
Yeah, it's probably no different than being a defensive coordinator, right? You have a system that you believe in, but you're always trying to figure out how to evolve it. How is somebody else doing it a little bit better? Is there something I can add to really, right? And so you built your resume as a defensive coach through all of that. And then it's very similar with NIL now. It's, okay, I have a philosophy on how I think we need to do this in order to be successful, to build a championship level program, but is somebody have a better idea? Are there things I'm missing? Are there other things that I can think of? Are there different ways to look at it? Are the rules going to, and so I think you're constantly trying to have your process, believe in your process, but evaluate your process and make sure that it is the right one. And you have to be open-minded, I think, to taking ideas, hearing things, hearing thoughts, hearing what other people have access to, and making sure that what you're doing for your own kids is the best you can do for them.
When you look at your total career arc so far, hopefully there are a lot of chapters left in the book, but you've already been around for a while. People would assume, since you're the head coach at Texas A&M right now, you've never earned more per year than you're earning right now. This has just got to be the happiest you've ever been. And maybe you are very happy. But also, when you hear people tell their stories, like if I were to tell my story, I'd go back to a time I was making $24,000 a year working local news, dirt poor, relatively speaking, but I never had more fun than I had in those moments because of the people that I was around.
Yeah.
Love where I am now, but I still look back fondly on that time. Do you have like stops during your career where your profile was a lot smaller than it is now, but you look back and you're constantly storytelling and you're constantly drawing on it? Is there that point in your sort of Wikipedia page?
Yeah, honestly, I think there's a lot of them, though. I think because coaching is such a relationship business, and you've made so many connections with coaches that you've worked with, players that you've coached, high school coaches in the area in which you were coaching. I think it probably starts at Bowling Green and works to Wake Forest and even the quick stop at Notre Dame. And when I was here, like, you just make connections, and that's what coaching is. And so, I think you have fond memories really of everywhere that I've been. And I'm fortunate. Like, I've never had that horror story. I've never been at a place where, the bottom fell out and everybody was on the, I've just never really been through the negative side of this profession a little bit. And so, knock on wood that continues.
It's pretty interesting. Most guys you talk about, they'll have at least one dip. They'll have at least one or 2 year stretch that they'd just as soon forget, but they always use it. If they're in a head coach's chair, they use it, and they make sure my building never feels like that building felt. I mean, you never want to have gone through it, but sometimes you're better on the other side. How rare is that to really, when you listen to other people's nightmare stories, to really not have one of your own? Yeah,
you probably know how rare it is than I do, but no, I certainly feel fortunate, and I've been around great people, and I've been in great buildings, and I think that matters. And I think the people that you surround yourself, and then I think probably the thing that I took from all of it was, again, like you do here, you are aware. So I was never head buried in the sand thinking everybody had this type of environment. And so then when you become the head coach, you go out of your way to try to do everything you can to make sure that's the environment you put into your own building.
So I'm going to tell you how I saw last year, and then you tell me how you saw it or where I may be wrong.
Yeah.
The Notre Dame game early, back and forth, you lose that one. That had a ton of attention on it. Yep. Then you lose that one, and people's attention is probably off A&M for a little while. We came here for the Missouri game. Blowout win. I think that attracted attention again. Then you get down the stretch, the most important time of the year, people are watching, and you drop several games. And so it was a very weird dynamic, because when people weren't looking, you were winning, then people looked and you lost. And then you had some pretty strong things to say about the defensive side after the season was over, which I appreciated because it's just honesty. If you had to summarize last year really concisely for someone who never tuned in, how'd that thing feel to you?
Yeah, I think it was a step forward for our program and a missed opportunity to take multiple steps forward. I think that's what it really was. I think if you look at the performance of the year and what we were really able to do over the course of the year, it was certainly a step forward than where we had been in the recent seasons. And that's obviously always what you want, big picture in your program, is steps forward. I think probably the frustration at the end for me, for the people in this building, the players, everybody is we had put ourselves in position to really jumpstart this thing at a fast pace. And, we came up a little bit short down the stretch. And you got to live, you got to learn, you got to bounce back. And that's what life is, that's what football is. But that's probably the big picture of it.
I love following recruiting. I've always been passionate about it. I've always enjoyed trying to measure how much talent is on a team's roster comparatively, as much as we can from the outside.
Right.
One of the things I have noticed is Texas A&M, before you got here and including up until this point, never been poor in recruiting rankings. When you look on the backside, which people tend to overlook, when you look at the talent that's being pumped out, we just went through the NFL Combine, we're going to have the draft coming up. A&M's been a little shorter on that side of the conveyor belt than they have seemingly on the recruiting side with the talent coming in. Now, that either means the rankings were flawed, or the developmental piece wasn't there, or some combination of the above. Is that something you've observed, or am I just flat out off on that?
No, I think that's extremely accurate. And I think when we talk about what we have to do to take this program over the curve, that's exactly what it is. We have to have more NFL talent on the roster playing for us down the stretch, right? I think that's when you look at where we are draft pick wise relative to where we need to be winning at the level Texas A&M should be winning at. That's the biggest jump we have to make, right? And that's on so many levels. I think it's evaluating the kids that you're bringing into the program and every aspect of the kids that you're bringing into the program, and not are we just getting the highest rated kids we can get, but are we getting kids that we truly believe and know project to be NFL draft picks? Because at the end of the day, when you look at who wins the SEC, it's the team that gets the most guys drafted, right? That's pretty standard throughout the board. And we've got to make sure that we pay a lot more attention to that side of this thing. And then it matters what we do when we get them, right? And part of it is that, the culture that we have, the accountability, the development, the growth, the kid's desire to become everything that he is capable of becoming. That matters. And then doing it across all positions, right? Because if you look, we've been a little bit heavy in some positions and light in others.
How do you internally sort of self-scout that or quality control that? How do you identify a guy? If I were to come in, I'm from Bastrop, Texas, I'm a 5-star linebacker.
Yeah.
You identify me as such. You beat Alabama and Texas to land me. And then I come in and you do everything you know to do and I don't pan out.
Yeah.
How quickly do you know this was an evaluation miss versus we dropped the ball on development, or there could be C, which is I didn't have my head on straight, and then it's on me. Like, when you quality control that, I got to assume you have to put that into buckets so that you can scout your own process and know we dropped the ball here versus, well, we did what we could do, it just wasn't meant to be.
Yeah, I think that's something that I've tried to be very proactive at going back years, which is, okay, here's the kids that I like that we brought into our program. Here's the ones that worked. What is it about them that made it work? Here's some that didn't. What is it about them that caused it to fail? Here's kids that went to other schools that I liked, that succeeded, that I didn't like. And just really trying to do the best you can to evaluate that, right? I think that's what the best NFL front offices do, right? They create some type of system and belief of what leads to the most productive results and stick to it, right? And stick to it to the best of their ability. And I think that's as important of a strategy in your roster development and your recruiting as can I go out and get the kid from wherever who is getting recruited by whoever, because sometimes you're in such a race to win the recruiting battle, you're not even paying attention to what you're landing, right? And I think what you're landing is obviously the most important thing, and we got to be really diligent about how we do that.
When you guys are going after kids in the portal, I know you've got a strategy, you're very selective about it, but there's a relationship you and I would have if you had recruited me since I was a sophomore in high school. And then there's another way you have to recruit a kid that was playing for Minnesota or Illinois or whatever, and you want them because they can fill a need for you. What kind of relationship, realistically, can you have with that guy that even comes close to comparing to the relationship you have with the high school guys before you land them?
Yeah, I mean, it's night and day. I think when you talk about portal recruiting, unless it's a kid that you had recruited or had a relationship with at some other part in the journey, it's literally a night and day process, right? And what you're talking about when you're dealing with the portal is much more of NFL free agency. Here's our need, here's what we can do to help you get where you want to go, here's your skill set, here's how we see it fits, here's how it complements. It's very much an NFL style conversation in so many ways when you're recruiting out of the portal, as opposed to when you're trying to talk about taking a 16-year-old out of his house for the first time and how you're going to nurture, take care of him, develop him, grow him as a man, help him get a degree. Like, that's a completely different recruiting, right? And so really you're functioning almost in two separate worlds, and then sometimes they cross, right? Sometimes it's a kid that you developed a great relationship with in recruiting who is now in the portal, right? And now it's just kind of a mix of both. Hey, you remember we trusted each other, we developed this relationship, but here's where now this is the right place for you, and here's the things that we can do to help you.
I saw a study about weddings the other day, how much money is spent on someone's first wedding versus the relative cost if someone has a second wedding.
Right, very similar.
It's night and day different.
Very similar.
And I got to imagine the conversations also with a recruit out of high school, it is overarching, it's everything under the sun. How many of the guys that you start to approach out of the portal just look you in the eye and say, don't even waste your time on all that. I don't care about all that. I already went through it. Just shoot me straight. Here's what I'm looking for. Are you looking for this? Let's get it done.
The ones that we want.
Yeah.
I think that's really kind of where you're at with it. It's you're trying to find kids that for whatever reason believe your program, your scheme, your fit is the right one for them, right? And if that's the relationship you can establish quickly, then let's roll. And I think back to the Nick Skirton recruitment, and obviously he was a really talented player for us last year, but that was literally like, hey, let's talk about how we can put you in position to be as successful as you need to be as a defensive end to get where you want to go, right? And it's cut and dry, and I don't care who else is recruiting you. It's not about, like, let's just get this, and it's just so different. It's completely different.
There's this thing that's been happening quietly out loud, I would say, in the overall profile of college football players. I was talking to my dad. I went home last weekend, and my dad just always peppers me with questions. And one of the things that he asked me, as anyone his age would, from the outside looking in, is, I would think with all the social media out there and all the NIL money, it's never been tougher to corral guys. It's never been tougher to count on them to make the right decisions. And I told him, my observation is it's been the total opposite. I have never had less feedback from coaches about guys getting in trouble off the field. The headlines are virtually non-existent now. Not to say it doesn't happen, but have you observed that, I guess one of the plus sides of infusing constant awareness of being visible on social media and money is such that guys are a lot more careful with the decisions they make now?
Yeah, I think people have matured through the social media age a little bit, and like everything, when it becomes new and it becomes fresh, there's a lot of growing pains that you go through, and I think a lot of programs, a lot of kids went through those, right? And then you have this now large group of life lessons you can teach through mishaps of other people, unfortunately, right? But here's where social media steered kids wrong. Here's some of the pitfalls to it. Here's some of the downfalls of it. And I think our kids now that we have in our locker room are a lot more aware of the negative side of what can come from the choices and decisions they make through social media.
How would you describe the mental aspect of a game day to the 99.99% of the audience who will never be there? They'll never wear a headset. You get 12 of those a year guaranteed.
Yeah.
The rest of your season, the rest of your life is consumed with revolving around those 12 Saturdays you're going to get. And you're going to have 100+ thousand in the house. You're going to have millions at home watching, and everyone is investing their emotional equity into whether you and your team can get the job done or not. And yet, you could pay attention to all that, but at the end of the day, like, the process of winning is the process of winning. Where do you have to get to mentally to be a head coach on a game day?
Yeah, probably a lot of different places, to be honest with you. I think when you think about it, you're working 12 to 18 hours a day year round to be judged by 12 3-hour blocks in the fall, of which the majority of those 3-hour blocks are going to come to 5 or 6 moments that you have no idea what those moments are actually going to be, only that every game is going to have them, and at some point they're going to show up, and you're going to have done everything in your power to get your 18 to 22-year-olds to make the best decisions and the best choices in those moments and perform at the level they're capable of. And so that kind of takes a large prism of characteristics, mental spectrums, whatever you want to call it, but it's different. It's for sure different. And then you've got to have this calmness about you because you're the leader of a whole organization that feels the same way, right? You're not the only person aware of how important that 3-hour block is on a Saturday. And so you've got to have that calming influence, that calming voice on the sideline to make sure that your organization can go where you want it to go and your program can go where you want it to go.
I think the other fascinating part just of a game day, the psychology of a game day, is you could be someone like anyone watching this, you could be like me, we immerse ourselves in it all week long too. We're not coaching a program, but we're totally immersed. I know the game I'm going to on Saturday. I'm focused on it. I could recite to you 15 talking points, and yet when you're there in the 90-minute, 60-minute, 30-minute lead up to kickoff in an environment like major arenas and venues in the South, it's such a sensory overload that you find yourself 20 minutes to kickoff and your mind's in 15 different places. And I'll watch you guys go warm up out there, and I'll watch you stand stoically and you're watching this group or that group. And sometimes I just wonder, where is a coach's mind there? You could have a million different things in your head going through your mind right there. How hard is it to just stay centered, or do you reach the point where you just clear the mechanism and nothing else is existing?
Yeah, I think part of it is clearing the mechanism. I think part of it is projecting calmness. I think part of it is you're truly trying to figure out, okay, amongst all this chaos, which it is, right, at times, what can I see? What am I noticing? What can I see in my guys? What can I see in my players? Is there anything that I can do to help move this thing along, right? What they don't need amongst 105,000 people going crazy and sensory overload for sure is me going crazy, right? And me adding to it. And so you just try to give them whatever you can give them in those moments that are going to help them get out on the other side the right way.
I remember when we were here for, I think, the Texas game afterwards, I was talking to your head groundskeeper, because number one, the place looks like a putting green. So It's just crazy that you can have grass that quality. But I remember him laying out some of the fine details of his job. I remember walking through this building several times since I've been here and just looking at the fine points of implementing something as simple as the logo on the back wall of the team meeting room. Well, that all comes from you. You're making most to all of those decisions, and you're saying, I want this here. I want that to look like that. I want the end zones painted maroon instead of what they used to look like. How do you decide how you want that stuff to look?
You try to compartmentalize. I think as the CEO, right, and I talk about this all the time, as the head football coach at Texas A&M, you wear two hats, and they're completely different on so many levels. One is I'm the head football coach, and I've got to make sure the football side of this thing is running the right way. But then there's also this CEO element of what I do, right? And the CEO of Texas A&M football is responsible for all of it, right? Our social media presence, what our game day looks like, what the music in the stadium feels like, the atmosphere, and not that you're solely responsible for it, but you have to care about it because all of those things are going to impact how people view your program, which is ultimately going to impact your ability to have success, right? And then you walk around the building, and so much of, and this is just great leaders within business, I think, you're trying to create this environment that breeds culture, and you want it to look right in every aspect of it so that everything is intentional, every painting on the wall, the Aggie legends, which legends we're putting on the wall. We got to make sure they're all the right ones, and the signage, the verbiage, the communication, it's all got to flow in a certain way, because that to me is where your culture is getting built in the times when you're not in front of the guys, in the times when you're not watching it. Maybe they walk down the hallway and they happen to notice the plan to win. Maybe they walk down the hallway and they happen to notice an Aggie legend doing it, and it clicks in their mind a certain way. They see the grind logo and it clicks. You just never know how you reinforce all of that. And so that to me is just a completely separate bucket of running a program that I think is as critical as what play we call, because, I've said this for years, we can call a play and it's going to work or not work based on so many factors. And I can call the play in one game and I can be a genius because it works perfect. And you can call the same play against the same defense in the same situation. And for whatever reason, someone doesn't do it right and it doesn't work and you're the idiot, right? And that's just football. And if you know football, like, that's really what it is. And so I think that CEO stuff and some of those things that you do maybe are what give you a little margin for error to make sure that the plays that you call actually work out the way you want them to.
Do you draw more inspiration from watching how other head coaches have done it as it relates to being the CEO, or are you the kind of guy who may look at the CEO of Aflac or Coca-Cola? I'm just mentioning companies based in Georgia because those are the one I know.
Yeah.
But, like, where do you draw inspiration in that front?
Success. I think, to me, what I'm looking for is successful leaders across any platform, right? And to me, there's so many carryovers between being the head football coach at Texas A&M and running a business, running a successful basketball team, running a successful football team, running whatever, right? And so to me, what I'm trying to always study is success and who has had success, why, what are the reasons why, what did they do that maybe you can learn from? And I think that's one of the things we really try to implement in the program in the off season, is trying to get these guys to see and study successful people. I think one of the things this generation doesn't always do the best job of is creating a knowledge base of what leads to success, right? They see these flash highlights on Instagram and TikTok and they see that part of it, but I don't know that a lot of them can tell you the story of Kobe Bryant's work ethic, or the story of how LeBron came up, or whatever, Steph Curry in the gym, and trying to make sure that they know all of the things that go behind why they're seeing the success that they're seeing.
But doesn't a part of that being the culture right now sort of serve as a selling point to a guy? Because if I look at a guy and I say attention spans have never been shorter, knowledge base has never been more fractional than it is now. Therefore, if you learn to think the right way, you'll stand out way more in 2025 as a 20-year-old kid than you would have in 1995. Does that not light a fire under the right kind of guy?
I think so. I think the right kind of guy really embraces what we're talking about, what we're doing, what we're implementing, because I think they see it as a competitive edge. And to some degree, and this is just generational, right? It's always like, oh, they're talking to me in a way that I've never been talked to before. And that's part of it, right? That's part of the culture you're trying to build and you're trying to get them to understand. But I've always believed if you want to get somewhere, find someone else who did that before and study how they did it. And as many times as you can do that, the better you'll be.
You guys got to the end of the season last year. After the bowl game, you spoke about as strongly as I heard any head coach speak to wrap their season, specifically about how let down you felt with the defensive performance. So you can't do anything to change the past. You can affect the here and now moving forward. What tangible steps did you identify that you needed to take to rectify that?
Yeah, I just think, we had an opportunity in 3 games down the stretch that we could have made plays on defense that would have changed the outcome. And it's really the first time in a long time that I've experienced that, the defensive letdown becoming the big reason. And so I think awareness is key. I think you got to identify what I think the problems are, and not to get into those for everybody, but I think you internally identify what you think the issues and problems are, and then you got to set a course forward. And all this happens back in December, and I think we set a course forward to what we believe will ultimately get us the results that we want and help us take the step we need to take.
What part of your identity as a head coach would you say has evolved the most from day one of having that position?
Yeah, probably just the CEO element of it. And I've said this to people before. I used to joke, like, when I was a defensive coordinator, like, well, I'm running 50% of the program. Of course I'm ready to be a head coach. And then you get into that head coach chair and you realize you had about 5% of the program when you were running the defense. And I think just understanding what all of it is, right? What all of it entails, how to be good at all of it, not just the football side of it. Getting in front of a group and talking to them. I've been doing that for years as a defensive coordinator. It's some of those other aspects of the program that I think we can learn and develop, and I think that's probably in 3 years where I've grown the most.
There is So much change happening right now. I know change has always been happening, but I would put the last 5 years of college football up against any 5-year period, any sport, including this one in history. So if I watch that as a fan, it may frustrate me, but that's just because I like things the way they are, and I like this, don't like that. You are trying to cast a vision to lead a program. And it's not like you can change on the fly. It's not like video game settings where this rule changes, so I'm going to change this about my process. It's like a 2-year implementation thing to change some of the more 50,000-foot aspects of your program, but yet no one wants to hear big earners complain about anything.
Right.
They just want you to produce results. So I got to imagine you drive home sometimes, you just punch your steering wheel because there's stuff you can't control that's impacting your job, but yet how important is it to make sure the people here don't see that, the people you're representing don't see that, they just need to see a leader.
Yeah, I think we have to be problem solvers. I think that's, if you study like the number one trait of a great football coach, problem solving is going to be at the top of that list, even if he's the linebacker coach at a small school. And so, you just kind of take that mindset of, okay, like give me the landscape, and then I got to figure it out, and I got to solve the problems, and hurdles are going to come, curveballs are going to come, things are going to change direction. And I think in so many ways, those are the challenges we loved about coaching when we got into it, was that ability to have to adapt and think on the fly. And I think that's something that keeps the brain fresh and going. I don't know that I ever would have signed up for quite this much change and having to adapt and think on the fly. But when you break it down into that cube like that, I think you can come away and say, okay, yeah, like that's still what the job is. The job is, here's the landscape, problem solve your way through it to put yourself on the right side and make sure you're doing and it's all about the kids, right? It's making sure you're doing the best you can to run the best program you can for all the kids in your program, right? And that's what it's about.
Let's wrap with this. I think it's probably the question most people are interested in. You can't predict wins and losses in the fall. That comes down to what we were talking about a few minutes ago. But holistically, the program where it is now versus the standard you want it to meet, where is it?
Yeah, I think it's en route, right? And it sounds gray, and I'm going to give you the coach speak a little bit on that one, but we are heading in the direction we want to go. I know what's happening behind these walls. I know what's happening in this building. I can see this thing transforming and changing. We want it to be elite as fast as we could possibly get it there. And obviously we have a strong belief that that's going to happen this fall. But the program's heading in the direction it needs to head to ultimately become what you and a lot of people outside of this building believe Texas A&M football should be. And so it's going where it needs to go.
Mike Elko, we appreciate it, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Josh.
Thank you.